So there are actually two presentations today, both on the topic of open source. The agenda really is to go through a quick overview of the different categories of open source tools that we're aware of out there that have some impact on CDA. We'll discuss briefly some of the more established open source projects that we're aware of, and then some of the emerging ones that have come to our attention. We'll pause and take questions then, and we'll cover that as a general theme. And then we're going to go on to a second presentation. The second presentation is kind of, I guess, a little bit more technical, in that we'll be looking at code and XML and such like that. So if that's not your thing, feel free to drop out at the question time, and we'll keep the technical stuff separate. Okay, so as far as open source tools, where we sit within Connecting for Health, we've been involved in working with CDA for some time, and we've categorized tools into three main areas. So there are tools that are there for creating the CDA profiles. So that's for creating the products that we publish, and the specifications, the MIMs and DMSs, message manuals that people implement against. So all those definitions, the schemas, the models and such are all created by tools, and all the tools that we use here in Connecting for Health are all open source. So we do not use any proprietary tools in creating the products that you use, other than where we do, we use open source extensions to those. So pretty much it's all open source. It's available in a number of places historically, and should anyone want it, all they need to do is drop us a call and we'll be happy to hand it over to them. But that's really not what this conversation is about today. What we're really concerned about today is open source tools that help in the creation of CDA documents, or open source tools that aid in the consumption of CDA documents, and that's where we're going to focus our attention for today. So, as we go through the presentation, I'm going to mention a number of tools, and there's only a short number. This is not to say this is all the tools that exist. These are all the tools that we're aware of. So if you're aware of the tool, it's not on here, it's not a slight on that tool, it's just that we weren't aware of it. And by all means, if you want to send details in or make us aware of that, then we'd be happy to mention it in future forums. So as far as the HL7 standards community go, there are two real dominant tools as far as CDA goes. The first is the Model Driven Health Tools project, which is run out of the USA, and is part of the Open Health Tools suite of open source initiatives. And then there's a second one, which is run by Mohawk College in Canada, which calls itself the Everest Framework, and there's URLs on the screen there. So a bit more about model-driven health tools. So model-driven health tools it offers quite a wide scope of functionality. So the diagram on the screen is taken from their website. And it's equally adept at creating the specifications as it is for the implementation of those specifications. So if you look on the screen, on their website, you'll find a whole wealth of more information, but it allows APIs in there. I think it's got some integration into Mirth, and it's got validation suites and all sorts. So it really is a very comprehensive and rich set of tools, and is actively being developed at the moment by a community of people in America. It's built using a Java and Eclipse technology stack. There's overview documentation I say on the website. You feel free to look at that. Currently, it's really not of any use as it stands for people implementing the NHS CDA profiles. And that's predominantly down to the way that we manage our templating process here in England, which is different to how they do it in America. So for those of you into the HL7 methodology, there's a debate regarding open templating and closed templating. Here in England we do closed, in America they do open. So the Model-Driven Health Tools team did approach us in January of this year to begin an exercise for them to consult with us onto what our closed templating methodology is, how our tools support it, and they're exploring whether they can implement that into their tool set because in America they're getting increasing pressure to move towards a closed templating approach. So that conversation's only just initiated in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, and we're tracking that one, and we'll feedback should any new capabilities appear in those tools. So onto the Everest framework. So the Everest framework is written out of Mohawk Technology College in Canada, which has a raft of computer software graduates and PhD students been working on it for a number of years, and their tool set is based around HL7 version 3 more broadly, not just CDA. And it's very rich in that what it does, it can take a MIF file, and a MIF file is an XML file that describes the HL7 models, and so the diagrams and all the annotations and all the schemas that we have in our specifications are all generated from MIF files, and the MIF files are present in our specifications. So if you've ever wondered what that MIF file was in our specification, that's what it's there. And its sole purpose in life really is to be the single point of truth about that message. And the reason that we publish it is so that if people choose to, they can go and do code generation of it or suck it into other tools. And this is what the people in Canada are doing. So their tool set is based on the .NET platform and is developed in C#, but last year they started porting this across to Java technologies. So there's a wealth of more information on their website, and they support C#, they support mobile platforms, a whole raft of different technologies they're looking at the moment. Unfortunately, once again, it's not immediately transferable to how we do things here in England, really. And that's because although they generate code and such based upon the MIF files, they do not support any form of templating at the moment. So we don't do the US model and we don't do the English model. If you wanted to create a generic vanilla flavored CDA document, it would support you in that, but it wouldn't support you in any of the templated methodologies that other people around the world have developed. That said, I'm sure for the right technically skilled people, it's possibly achievable on the basis that this is an open source project, but I'm not aware of anyone who's currently working in that area. Okay, so moving on. So they're the only two projects I could find that were that seemed to be active, seemed to have developed something that was used and being used by others. I am aware that there's a raft of other things out there, and what I am suspecting, in fact I know because people have muttered it to me in the last day or two, is that as part of the ICF initiative that's underway at the moment, people are creating CDA. In fact, the lion's share of the ISF projects are creating CDA documents. And some of those are developing tools that they intend to release in an open source manner. I'm guessing after the heat's off and they have a bit of time to breathe at the end of the ICF. So I'm strongly suspecting that post-March into April and May, other open source initiatives will start surfacing around this area. So once again, we'll keep our eyes open for those, and as and when we're aware of those, we'll feed details back through the CDA forum. So, two projects which we do know about, and this of course are closer to home and attached to people who work around the Connecting for Health area, are a project called CDA API, which is intended for creating CDA documents, and another one called ITK payloads, which, as its name suggests, is focusing on creating payloads for the ITK message set. So a bit more detail about those. So the CDA API project is hosted on GitHub. It's available, the URL is there, and people are welcome to go and take a look at that. It's primarily developed by Richard Kavanagh, i.e. myself, and I would add, although it's developed by myself, it is not a product to Connecting for Health. It is in no way attached to Connecting for Health, ITK, or Department of Health. It's a personal endeavor. It's developed in C# under an Apache 2 license, and it does make reuse of some of the components from the Everest framework, which I previously discussed. The way that the Everest framework is developed, it's got a very well-layered architecture to it, and I've used one of the lower layers, which saved me a lot of effort in having to recode things myself. So the CDA API is developed to create CDA documents. So it has no part to play in consuming CDA documents. Its sole purpose is to help the creation of CDA documents. And it was developed by myself, as I say, some time ago now, really as an interest in how implementable our specifications were. Because clearly, we create specifications and we don't currently build any reference implementations of those specifications. So the interest I had was, so just how hard would it be? And it was a learning exercise, I must say. I am not a professional software developer, and it did point out a number of ambiguities and issues with our specifications, which was good, and that's the purpose of it, and that has resulted in those errors and ambiguities being addressed in the version of the specs that are currently published. So the CDA API currently supports two CDA profiles. It supports the ITK non-coded CDA profile, and very recently it also supports the NHS 111 CDA profile. So the ITK non-coded CDA profile I know is being used within at least a couple of the IACF projects. In fact, we have had code contributions back into there to deal with a defect from Blackpear software. And the NHS 111 CDA profile was created by Matt Stibbs, who forked the original code and created some additional coding to support the NHS 111 templates, which then I assisted him, and that's recently been pushed back into the core code base. So that's where it stands at the moment. As far as development plans go, the intent next is to support child screening CDA profile. The reason behind that is, one is most of the templates required for that CDA profile have already been implemented. I think there's only 4 or 5 additional templates required, and it would be the first profile which starts getting into the nitty-gritty of coded clinical entries within the CDA documents. After that, potentially discharge summary, quick end of life, really don't know. We'll see what pans out. And as I say, I do know that this has been used in some of the ISCF projects, and no, that's good, and that's how it was a good payback on it. So the next on the list is doesn't really have a project name, but it's hosted on Bitbucket and a project tag of ITK payloads. And this is quite a recent endeavor by Adam Hafferly, who is one of the architects working on the QUIC program here at the HID. And as it stands today, what it is doing, it's a Java-based technology, and its focus at the moment has been on the QUIP notifications message, which is a HL7v3 message currently out in draft for the QUIP program. Excuse me. Adam's plans are to move that on now to support the QUIP end-of-life CDA profile. It doesn't do it at the moment, but that's his next challenge. There is a URL there at the top of the page, and if you follow the URL at the bottom of this page, you'll go off and see some of the code examples that are already there for the notifications message. Okay. So, as I said before, these are just two of the projects we're aware of. I hear mutterings of projects out there based around some of the open source integration engines. I hear mutterings of other projects where people have developed open source code to create CDA content for ISCF and other projects. I'm hopeful that these will emerge as open source projects for the benefit of the community, and as I say, as and when they do, then we'll publish them. I can certainly speak for CDA API, and I guess for Adam as well, in saying that participation in these open source projects is very welcome. If anyone wants to roll their sleeves up and join in, then make contact, and I'm sure you'll be welcomed aboard. Okay, so I mean that was just a very brief overview of our view of what's the open source out there. Clearly, it's not every open source project that's out there. And if we have any questions, we'll be happy to take them now. So, okay, Rob raised his hand. We'll just get you off mute. By the way, Rob.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks very much. I've just you flick through the links a bit quickly. If you
we will publish it.
Just so I could bring up the Adam's code whilst we're on the code, whilst we're on the webinar.
I'll tell you what, while we're talking,
I'll just paste it into the chat room.
Put that back there.
Thank you. And also, as I just tried to mention in the chat room to everybody, you were talking about mutterings of other bits of code. Yes, certainly, when Tactics 4 have finished the ISCF activities, we'll be releasing the code bases that we've been working on for ADT and CDA in the ITK ISCF pieces. We've had our ADT accredited at the beginning of the month, and when our CDA bit is done and accredited, that code will be made available as well. That's all Java-based Apache service mix piece.
Okay, great stuff. Okay. We did receive a question over the chat asking whether these slides and presentations from the other WebEx that we published, I'll put a hand up saying we've been a little slow on that, but this presentation, the presentation from Green CDA, the presentation from the DTS will all be published tomorrow. So we will forecast, we'll circulate the links to those tomorrow. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have a question from Rene, which is privately being asked.
Well, it was just an update as shown in the chat box, as you can probably see. And there's a bit of noise here in the background, so you probably can read the text. This was just for completeness sake, an open source tool that's related to the generation of schematron files based on CDA templates.
Okay, that's great. I mean,
compared to something like Everest, personally, I would definitely prefer something solid, code generation based like NDHD or Everest over this Decor tool.
Okay.
But that's all. So I guess you better put me back on mute again then.
Okay, thanks for that, Renee. Okay, we've just been posing another question talking about the MIF document, what tools are available to view these. Personally, I'm not aware of any tools that are available to view MIF. It's a model interchange format. It's purely there for computers to consume. So I'm afraid I don't know of any tools that consume MIF. I mean, that you can view MIF with other than just a normal XML editor. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. So let me just... So I say there's an email address at the bottom there, so if any more questions do spring to mind regarding this or any of the presentations actually, then by all means drop us an email and we'll get back to you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a deeper dive into the CDA API, mainly just because obviously I'm closer to that than the other ones, and having seen some of Adam's work, from what I've seen so far, it's not a million miles different, and I think what it will expose is really some of the potential benefits of using an API to create CDAs than potentially creating it yourself or going on other routes. Clearly, somewhere in the development process that people are going through, they have to make a design choice which way they want to go, and that's wholly known that there'll be lots of factors that need to be considered as to which way we do go, and this is just one of the